get to the matter at hand with our amazing opening keynote speaker. Truly my pleasure to introduce you all to Jen Auerbach today. Jen is the Managing Director and Head of Strategic Growth Markets at Merrill Lynch Wealth Management. She and her team focus on client acquisition, client retention, and also strategic growth initiatives. Interestingly, they focus predominantly on underserved communities and individuals. So she and her team are true believers that everybody can benefit from good financial advice, and they're trying to make that happen. She got her undergraduate from Dartmouth and her MBA from Columbia in New York, and she's had quite an interesting journey along the way. She actually got started as an options trader, which is kind of a rowdy place to get started in the financial services industry. And so I'm sure she's got stories to share around that. Along her journey, she has done things like developed new financial products. She's developed new platforms to allow better access to financial services. And also, interestingly, and very current right now, is she's worked on a lot of impact investing initiatives. So quite a diverse journey that has brought her to where she is today. In addition to her day job, she's really passionate about serving in the community and increasing diversity and inclusivity within financial services. And as such, she's an active alumna of the Sponsors for Educational Opportunity. And she also sits on Merrill's Diversity and Inclusion Council. I could go on quite a while about the many acknowledgments, accolades, and rewards she's received. So I'm just going to tease you with a few that she has. She won the Bank of America Global Diversity and Inclusion Award. In 2019, she was recognized by Paradigm for Parity's Women on the Rise initiative as one of 19 trailblazing women trying to break down barriers to help with equality in corporate America. And just this last year, she was recognized as a Rising Star, the 2020 Rising Star by Crain's New York Business. So, and one final, because I always love to throw in the little personal, Jen's 2020 was a big year for her. As I mentioned, she was recognized with this terrific Rising Star Award, and she and her husband welcomed their first child. So it was a big year with a new path for her there. And so please join me now in welcoming Jen as she talks to us today about making your own path. She will be accepting questions at the end, so please be sure to, if you have questions, type them in chat. We'll curate them and then be happy to ask them with Jen. All right, Jen, it's all you. Take it away.
Oh my goodness, that is quite an introduction. Thank you so much, Evelyn. First, let me start by saying, Fiona and Laura, you are such rock stars and inspiration. Congratulations. That was an incredible way to kick off the program. Thank you, Evelyn. Those were just wonderful remarks. And thank you to Mara and Susan for inviting me to be a part of this. Hello, everyone. It is a thrill to be here. I'm Jen Auerbach. I'm so excited to be the keynote for the 5th annual SoCal Women's Symposium. And before I go any further, happy Women's History Month. It's incredibly energizing to be virtually surrounded by wonderful rock star women of all ages and stages from all backgrounds. And actually, my plan today is to take a little bit of a personal route, and I'm happy to talk about my bio and professional accolades, but I really thought, in the spirit of this year's program theme, focused, flexible, and purposeful, that I would try my hardest to stick to that. And so if you'll indulge me and more like bear with me. I certainly won't pretend to have the answers to everything, but I did want to share how I felt that each of these concepts did connect with my story. So first, throughout my career, focus is what I lived and breathed. I'm sure many can relate, but every day for me came with a to-do list. To be candid, spontaneity was not something that ever really came naturally to me. It still doesn't. And it really wasn't until I became a mother that I actually began to understand what it meant, what it truly meant to be flexible. to be flexible with scheduling, to be flexible with my partner, to be flexible with myself. And it also made me realize that living with purpose doesn't have to be this grand plan. It's about small things, like the connections that we make with those around us. And so that's what I'll share. I will not pretend to have all the answers. I will not tell you about the 5 ways that you can begin to live a life full of meaning. And I will certainly not pose as someone who should be admired for some of her unhealthy tendencies. And then most importantly, I would love to hear from you and know what's on your mind. And hopefully we can have a wonderful discussion from there. Okay, focus. Where do I begin? Certainly that's been the dominant mantra in my career. But truth be told, focus has been my way of existing for as long as I can remember. Middle school was all about getting into the right high school. High school was all about getting into the right college. And college was all about getting the right internship. And throughout all of it, a constant state of striving for better with daily to-do lists. I mean, I remember in the 2nd grade, getting an assigned seat all the way in the back of the classroom. And I recall going up to the teacher, Miss Starr, and telling her that I could not see the chalkboard from my seat. And if it wouldn't be too much trouble, could she please somehow manage to move me to the front? I also didn't realize that that benign request would send me straight to the optometrist and result in my wearing tortoise-printed Coke bottle eyeglasses for the rest of my formative years. They're actually quite trendy now, but oi, as a 2nd grader, not so much. I was little Jenny Auerbach, quiet in the classroom, never asked questions, but I was always prepared. I always did my homework. I did the extra credit. I got the 100 on the pop quiz. And I was that kid who did all of her summer reading before it was even July. And then I think about high school. I was fortunate and blessed to be able to go to an incredibly rigorous program. Everyone was so smart, just as prepared and focused as I was. It was hard, but eye-opening. It's actually when I first learned to practice how to stay organized. It was really quite incredible. Candidly, my to-do list might be a strength of mine, but it was also a bit of an Achilles heel. And when I needed to use different muscles and skills to get through the day, I don't know that I had them. So from one to-do list to the next, one degree to the next, one internship to the next. And for anyone who has heard me speak, you know that I've talked about having every intention of becoming a lawyer. Part of the beauty of growing up in a multicultural home and having a Dominican mother is that you had 2 choices of career paths. You were going to become a doctor or a lawyer. And so I was on the path to becoming a lawyer. And so I majored in philosophy when I was in college. I interned at Davis Polk in New York City. And even when I thought I was demonstrating ultimate flexibility and pivoting my career aspirations away from law to something so foreign and so unknown like financial services, ultimately, it was that to-do list that enabled me. Step 1, apply to this business school prep program. Step 2, apply for this internship. Step 3, take Econ 101, and so on. And my career at Merrill certainly continued to offer endless opportunities to practice my focus. And this sort of relentless dedication is what I did practice throughout the first 12 years of my career. And even when my husband and I found out we were having a baby, I still felt like if I can just stay focused, everything will be fine. And I remember it was January, February of last year, 2020, weeks before the world shut down. I was 6 or 7 months pregnant at the time and feeling great. I was waking up earlier than ever before. My team can attest that my good morning emails started to come in at 6 a.m., 5:45. I'm embarrassed to now say that sometimes even earlier than that. I had just been given a promotion and my team had tripled in size. The scope of my portfolio had done the same, but I had my plan, my to-do list, and everything was going to be looked after, and this was going to be a smooth transition. But then COVID, and we all have that memory, that moment that is now frozen in time for us, when we remember the last regular, normal thing we did just before going into quarantine. I live in New Jersey with my husband, and we lived a typical commuter life. Public transit twice a day, crowded bus to crowded subway. I'm obviously doing this pregnant, and I remember being on one of the most crowded buses heading back to New Jersey after a long day. It was still super cold in the Northeast, March 6th, so wearing a massive coat, no one could tell that I was pregnant, and I was just holding on to one of those swinging handrails, swaying back and forth, my scarf wrapped around my nose and mouth, and I was just praying that I wouldn't get stuck in the Lincoln Tunnel like we so often would. So COVID, okay, testing my focus, but I'm having a first baby in COVID. And then my baby shower got postponed indefinitely. And then it was unsafe for us to see our family. The village that was supposed to offer me tales of support and reassurance and help me raise this child. And then came loss. First, it was hearing about a friend who lost a parent to COVID or a distant relative who resided in a nursing home. But then it's your family. And I lost my grandmother at the end of March. It was fast. None of us except my aunt could be with her. No real goodbye. And it was during that moment, over those incredibly dark days, where my focus was really tested. And so fast forward, getting close to having this baby, but still 2 or 3 weeks away from my due date. And anyone and everyone told me and assured me I would know when I was having this baby. It would not be a surprise. Well, apparently that did not hold true for me. I went in for a regular checkup Monday morning, and lo and behold, I was actually already in labor. Doctor told me baby was coming and coming today or tomorrow. And if I weren't already sitting, I am sure my knees would have buckled underneath me. We bring my son home from the hospital, and he is beautiful and perfect and needs to eat every 2 hours. And for all the moms out there, hashtag mom life is real, and it humbles you in an instant. And now I've been back at work for 6 months now, and I'm embracing flexible, but it continues to be one of the hardest things for me to get right. And as I say it out loud, that sentence is probably one of the core reasons why I don't get it right. It's because there is no wrong and there is no right when it comes to being flexible. And so I am a work in progress. Do I know it's okay that my son doesn't get a bath from me every night? Yes. Does it still drive me crazy? Yes. Do I know it's okay if my son occasionally is fed formula? Yes. Does it still make me feel like I'm less than? Absolutely. And so then that brings me to purpose. What a grand notion to live with purpose. I never took any of that seriously. Don't get me wrong, I love the sound of it. I love the sound of hearing the SoulCycle instructor or the Peloton instructor talk about it. But really, what am I supposed to do with it? And so here's what I would say. I would be kidding myself and all of you if I said I live my life with this grand purpose, that I meditate routinely, that I make chamomile tea for myself before going to bed, or that I have successfully ever completed and attempted a device detox. But here are the things that do give me purpose. Making the people proud who sacrificed everything for me, making the people who believed in me proud when they had nothing to it, doing what I can to give my son a childhood that is full of happiness and wonder, and being a good daughter, wife and partner to my husband, a good sister, a good niece, and a good granddaughter. And so I absolutely love the theme of today's conference. As you can tell, it resonated deeply with me. And so thank you for having me, for letting me share myself as a work in progress story. And here is to celebrating this Women's History Month with focus, flexibility, and purpose. And so with that, Evelyn, I would love to open it up for Q&A.
Outstanding. Thank you so much for those really, truly inspiring words. And I have to give you a hat tip for the clear humility, because we all aspire and then reality surrounds us. And I think that you struck that really touching intersection between the aspiration and the reality. So thank you very much for that. I'm going to get us started, and then I will be looking for questions from the rest of the audience. But, you know, one of the things that you have done just a terrific job in doing is advocating for improved diversity and inclusivity across the financial services profession and in corporate America more broadly. So can you talk a little bit about how do you mentor or support women in your organization?
So, you know, nothing happens unless you actually do schedule it to happen. I do have to believe that. And it is one of the ways in which being a little type A actually allows me to say with a great degree of confidence that this happens. And so I believe that you have to dedicate time. Every week there is dedicated time on my calendar to have one-on-ones with my team, with women from across the organization. I'm one of the executive sponsors of our Women's Exchange, which is a network of 7,000 women at Merrill who, you know, are really looking for mentorship, peer-to-peer support, business development ideas. It's an incredible community, you know, 60 chapters across the United States, and that has been a wonderful way for me to, you know, connect with people, you know, outside of the New York, New Jersey, Connecticut sort of bubble, and ensure that, you know, there's much broader connection that's happening. And actually every year the Women's Exchange matches up at least 1,000 people for mentee-mentor partnerships. And so that's just one example. But the one thing I would say is, for anyone who's interested in being a mentor or being a mentee or both, I mean, look, it doesn't matter where you are in your career, there should always be someone who you aspire or admire. And therefore, you know, we can always be surrounding ourselves with, you know, smart people. And so, but the one thing that I would say, it has to be intentional. And I think this is one thing where, you know, being a bit type A will actually, you know, manifest itself in dividends.
Yes, yes, because without the intention, it becomes a social chat. And not that there's anything wrong with a social chat, but there's more to this exercise than just social chat. This is about elevating and empowering and changing the world, truly. And I know that sounds all grandiose, but it really does make a difference when women get involved in financial conversations and in facilitating financial health and growth. And I listened to an interview with you not too long ago that you talked about one thing that you thought could really move the needle on financial health is if people would just start talking about finances. Would you share that a little bit? I think our audience would really appreciate hearing your thoughts on that.
Sure. Yeah, so part of the work that my team was responsible for was in doing a much better job of engaging women and diverse communities in this topic of, you know, leaning into financial wellness. And so one of the studies that we commissioned explored women and financial wellness. And we found that 60% of the women surveyed would prefer to talk about their own death rather than money. And as a result of that insight, you know, it became clear to us, you know, yes, we need to have a plan for becoming more accessible, but step number one is that we need to think about that statistic and the level of discomfort that comes with talking about money and real, small, tangible ways in which we can start to ignite a conversation. And so I always like to lead by example, and however and whenever possible, because it's one thing, hey, start talking about money. It's really easy. It's another thing to actually do it. And so for me, I tell a simple story. It's true. I'm like, type A. I've gotten that point. My husband and I are moving to a new neighborhood, and we are not pregnant. We are now 2 years away from having a baby. But it is mission critical that my husband and I do a tour around to all of the various primary, nursery, daycare, Tuesday programs in the neighborhood, just to be sure that the neighborhood would work for us and our, at that moment, non-existent family. And so I share this story because I then said to my husband, one of the things that we need to do is set up a 529. And did you know that you don't need to have a child yet in order to set up a 529, but you can set it up in advance. We can start to fund it in advance. And then upon birth of said child, we can just transfer over the beneficiary name. And so that is sort of a real way in which my husband and I had an honest conversation about, yes, plans for the future, goals for the future, but like everything, it's all connected back to money. And it doesn't have to be this, crass thing. It can be as simple as, hey, does this matter to us? And if so, how do we prepare? And so I believe that, yes, igniting a conversation about money is the most important thing for all of us to do and embrace individually. And, again, it doesn't have to be this like uncomfortable thing. It can truly just be, about life's goals and hopes and dreams.
Okay. I mean, you just totally threw down the gauntlet. Planning for college savings for a baby that hasn't been born for 2 years. I mean, that's tricky, right? So that,
I wasn't exaggerating when I said that there is a to-do list. Like that has been the mantra.
Yeah. So, one thing that we hear often is that, different cultures, and I'm going on having conversations about money and normalizing it, making it not taboo and uncomfortable, so that you'd rather talk about your own death than finances. There are cultural differences in how people talk about money, and so what if a woman on the audience today comes from a cultural background where it's just not usual? Can you give a tip or two to maybe start to crack that barrier to have those conversations?
Yeah, here's what I would say. I think that the money piece comes in at the end, but the first thing you do is you're defining what matters to you. What are your goals in the short term, in the medium term, and in the long term? And look, I would be remiss if I didn't say having a conversation like that, plain and simple, nothing about money, nothing about how much you need to fund short, medium, or long-term goals, but having that conversation with a friend, with someone who you trust, or even a financial advisor, that just laying those facts out, what matters to you, is already setting you up for a successful conversation about talking about money. Because once you've articulated goals and you've said, this long-term goal is actually a long-term goal and needs to be somewhat deprioritized because I've got short and medium term right here looking at me in the face and I've got to figure this out, you will be much, feel the confidence that comes with having that articulation down. And then you'll realize that it's just one more step in terms of figuring out, and again, having a conversation with a trusted friend, a coworker. It doesn't always have to be a family member, right, in terms of who we go to for advice, or a professional, and get an unbiased opinion, right? Like, what would it take for me to achieve these things? With 90% degree of confidence, 50% degree of confidence, slim to no chance, right? Like that is what this exercise is intended to do. And so that would be the best advice that I can give. It's number one, outline what matters to you and what matters to you immediately, in the medium term, and in the long term.
I love that recommendation, because I think leading with goals, hopes, dreams, whatever you would like to call them, but leading with that always makes it an easier conversation, because it's actually not about the money at that moment. It's about what's important to you, what inspires you, what is part of your purpose, if we're going to work that into this. So I really love that suggestion. And I would encourage the folks in the audience that if you have kids, because I'm sure that we all know Jen is going to be doing this, but model that behavior yourself. Don't be afraid to share that with your children, and at whatever age they might be, make it age appropriate, but then you can modify that messaging to share what's important to you, and then talk with them about how you as a parent are planning to achieve that financially. And that is how a generation changes, and a community and a nation changes their relationship with finances. So home stretch here, Jen. I do have one sort of, it's like the big umbrella kumbaya changing the world question, and that is just number one piece of advice you might like to leave with our audience today as we're thinking about focused, flexible, and purposeful, and the year ahead.
Well, let me see. Be gentle to yourself. Not every day is a day that you'll hit it out of the park, and that's okay. I think really hard about the relationships that matter to you, the relationships that bring you joy, and lean into them, invest in them, take time out for them to flourish. And, similarly or conversely, relationships that just don't bring you joy, don't be afraid to let them go. This year has taught me that being flexible, as much as I am a work in progress, is like the thing I need to do more of. And I do need to be selective in terms of where I spend my time and who I spend it with. And obviously my son being at the very top of that list. And so, I would say, give yourself grace, be kind to yourself. Don't set unrealistic expectations, and surround yourself with people and things and activities that truly do make you happy, even if it's for 15 minutes in your day.
Sound counsel for all of us, not just this year, but every year, truly. And with that, Jen, thank you so much for your time this morning. Truly great words for us to tuck into our toolkit as we're going through the symposium today, and also as we're thinking about the days and months ahead in 2021. So thank you so much for joining us, and we wish you joy with your new baby, and look forward to seeing you at another symposium here in the future.
Thank you. Have a wonderful symposium.